I wish he'd never appointed him, but now he's gone. It's shameful that Peter Mandelson didn't resign in the national interest.
The Prime Minister can say, I saw the emails, I've let him go. He knew that this was indefensible and he felt really uncomfortable.
Absolutely ludicrous defence that is being mounted by Peter Mandelson.
I don't know if I've seen you this angry. You're absolutely furious.
Do you know why I'm furious? I'll tell you why I'm furious.
Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Ruth Davidson.
And me, Harriet Harman.
Now, we have just recorded our podcast for you, but it is now 10 to 11 on Thursday morning. And as we are wrapping up the podcast, we have news for you, which is Peter Mandelson has been sacked by the Prime Minister. It's just been announced in the House of Commons, and you can hear from the conversation that we've had earlier, which we will play out to you in a moment, that this really was a done deal as far as Harriet and Ruth were concerned, that there was nowhere for Mandelson to go. And here is the statement.
In light of additional information in emails written by Peter Mandelson, the Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary to withdraw him as ambassador to the United States. The emails show, Mr. Speaker, that the depth and extent of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment. In particular, Mr. Speaker, Lord Mandelson's suggestion that Jeffrey Epstein's first conviction was wrongful and should be challenged is new information. And in light of that, Mr. Speaker, and mindful, as we all are, of the victims of Epstein's appalling crimes, he has been withdrawn as ambassador with immediate effect.
In light of that, and mindful of the victims of Epstein's crimes, he has been withdrawn as ambassador with immediate effect. Harriet?
Well, I think he's right to sack him. I wish he'd never appointed him, but now he's gone. I think it's really shameful that Peter Mandelson didn't actually resign. I think he should never have put himself forward for that job, knowing what Peter Mandelson, knew about what was likely to come out. So I think it's been a horrible, awful episode, and the important thing is to move on now.
Ruth?
Well, I think it's, one, mad that you appointed him, but two, absolutely mad that Keir Starmer stood up in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's questions yesterday and backed him and said that he had faith in him, and said it more than once, I have confidence in him. But it was clear as day that there was more to come out here, and that Mandelson knew about it when he put himself forward for the post, and that Keir Starmer couldn't have known about the extent of it. But there's I think a mistake here from the Tories as well, in that the timing of this, we're talking at 10 to 11 on Thursday, and it came out just before a Foreign Office Minister had to stand up in the Commons because the Tories had tabled an urgent question about Peter Mandelson, and they either had to guddle through another day of saying he's still in post, or they had to make a decision and fire him. And what I think it must have been a difficult decision for Keir Starmer, because he didn't do it yesterday, whereas actually this now will calm down a little bit for Keir Starmer. This makes, in a sense, part of this go away, and actually if you're the Conservatives, you probably wanted this to drag on.
I imagine for the Prime Minister, seeing him yesterday, that this will be relief to him, because you could see, I mean, Harriet, the way you described it was he was anguished by the continuation of Mandelson in the post. There's questions about why did he defend him in that moment, but we know in politics that sometimes you're trying to work out what to do and you adopt a holding position, and that seems to me what happened yesterday. I think there's probably more to come now about, well, what did you know when, and didn't you know this stuff when you appointed him, and why didn't you vet him more closely? And we talk about that in the pod. Harriet, what are the political consequences of this? Because the Prime Minister has had to let go of Angela Rayner. She had to resign over tax affairs and not upholding the highest standards in public office a week ago. And now here we are a week later, and he's sacked his ambassador around relationships with a convicted paedophile. I mean, this is politically really difficult for Starmer, isn't it? I mean, he was meant to uphold, he was going to do different things differently and have a clean government, no sleaze, etc., etc.
I think it's very difficult indeed. But I think that Keir Starmer will be feeling better because he'll know he's actually done the right thing, and I think he'll be comfortable in himself with this decision. But I think that even Peter Mandelson's biggest detractors, and I've certainly counted myself amongst his detractors, would never imagine, and Keir Starmer could never have imagined, that he would have written an email to a man who was in prison offering him love and support when he was a person convicted of sex offences against young women. So I think that really this has gone beyond the bounds of what Keir Starmer could have reasonably expected, and he's acted decisively and sacked him. It's shameful that Peter Mandelson didn't resign in the national interest, in the interest of the government, but he's not that sort of person, so it was right that Keir Starmer sacked him.
Yeah, let's be clear here. Peter Mandelson has had to either resign or be sacked from government twice before for sucking up to rich men and abusing his position. So scandal follows Peter Mandelson around like a bad smell. There was no reason whatsoever for the Prime Minister to make the UK ambassador to the US a political appointment. It hasn't been a political appointment for 50 years. He chose to override the Foreign Office hierarchy and the next person that was due to become an ambassador and due to take on that post as a career diplomat. He chose to ride roughshod over that, and he chose to make it political. He then also made another choice that political appointee should be Peter Mandelson. So the idea that, Keir Starmer gets to wash his hands of this, now he's gone, I think is for the birds, because it was a known quantity that Peter Mandelson was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. If they didn't investigate how close a friendship they had, how long it endured past his conviction, that he'd stayed at his house past his conviction, then that's on the government to have not vetted him properly.
And that I think that is going to be clearly the noise of the past few days. But you also know, both of you, because we've been in a number of these political scandal stories, that once the person goes, it kind of stems the momentum. Like if Mandelson had tried to hang on, it would have just keep going and going and going. And now the Prime Minister can say, I saw the emails, I've let him go, I've asked him to leave. And at least he has a position which is easier than the position he had yesterday when he's trying to defend what he clearly knew, I think, watching Starmer, was the indefensible. And that's why he was so uncomfortable in the Commons, because he knew that this was indefensible and he felt really uncomfortable.
I think people will feel very bruised still about what's happened, but with Peter Mandelson gone, the heat will go out of it, but still there will be lessons needed to be learned by Number 10.
We're a week out now from the state visit. I wonder how much water passes between now and then. Whether the government can turn the page on this somewhat. But you're right, these questions will be very alive. And I'm thinking, with my journalistic hat on, kind of what sort of questions will Trump get? Will there be more limited media access to Trump? I don't know. Because they want it to go smoothly. This is undoubtedly a massive spanner in the works. But ultimately, I think Keir Starmer saw the writing on the wall. One, I think he was clearly uncomfortable. You can see from the statement he's clearly sacked him. And number two, I just don't think his parliamentary party would have it. I actually think that had he tried to press on with this, he would have been in really, really, really deep trouble with his parliamentary party. But we have to go, ladies, because we are out of time in the studio.
Right, guys, as Beth says, we're having to go. That is our snap response, that Peter Mandelson has been sacked as the UK ambassador to the US. But if you want to hear more of our thoughts, we've gone far deeper into this whole scandal in the main pod.
Okay, so there's a lot to discuss. But Peter Mandelson, it's often been said that he was never far from a scandal. He literally had to resign from Tony Blair's cabinet, not once, but twice back in the day. He's always been seen as ruthless, from when he started as Neil Kinnock's comms man in the 1980s, all the way through to his time in Brussels as a trade commissioner. He came back to life under the Starmer administration, being dropped in as ambassador to Washington, Keir Starmer's pick for his ambassador to the US, and that is now coming back to bite him quite badly. I mean, this is an absolute mess.
It was always a risky move bringing Peter Mandelson back. I mean, he'd been put out to pasture in the Lords, but everywhere he goes, controversy follows, and it is almost always linked to rich men that he's sucking up to. So let's explain what exactly has turned up this week. Firstly, a birthday book for Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday.
As part of that book, what we've seen are 10 pages of notes from Mandelson calling Epstein his best pal, saying he loves him, as well as pictures of the two of them, including one of Mandelson in his dressing gown having breakfast, I think, with Epstein. So all of these very, very embarrassing pictures and messages between these two men have now come into the public domain.
They are absolutely toe-curling, some of them. And on Wednesday, Peter Mandelson did a bombshell interview with The Sun's Harry Cole, where he admitted that there would be a lot more embarrassing messages between him and Epstein that might come out. And he said he deeply regretted having ever got to know the paedophile and that they stayed in contact for longer than they should. And this is key because he stayed his friend after he was convicted of those child sex trafficking charges. And there was also a story in The Times about Mandelson trying to get Blair to meet Epstein and leaked emails showing that Mandelson basically tried to counsel Epstein after his charges in 2008. Like it is staggering, some of the level of that relationship.
Yeah,
and Keir Starmer was really put under the cosh on Wednesday, I thought.
What's really interesting also journalistically about this story is like Mandelson has clearly tried to get ahead of it. It looks like Bloomberg had this cache of 100 or so emails, messages. They wrote to Mandelson offering him a right of reply, and Mandelson, seeming to want to get ahead of the story, then did an exclusive interview with The Sun's Harry Cole in order to get his version of events out, and then subsequent emails have been published from Bloomberg. The crux of it is, as you were saying, Ruth, when it comes to how the parliamentary party are feeling, just the sniff test on all of this is the fact that what's emerged is that we knew that Mandelson had a friendship with Epstein, but what's emerged is he continued that friendship after the charges, and then he did business dealings with Epstein after he had been convicted of sexual offences in 2008. It's absolutely jaw-dropping. Let's hear how Keir Starmer tried badly to handle it in the Commons on Wednesday.
Let me start by saying the victims of Epstein are the forefront of our minds. He was a despicable criminal who committed the most heinous crimes and destroyed the lives of so many women and girls. The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
OK, so the PM there, under real pressure in the Commons, he looked really uncomfortable, but full confidence in his ambassador. What do we make of that? Who wants to go first?
Harriet?
Oh, God. I just think, sometimes I think I'm not suitable for politics because, I've got on the one hand my analysis of, what it means in relation to Keir Starmer's engagement with the Parliamentary Labour Party and with our manifesto commitment on women and girls and what it means in relation to our relationship with America and the forthcoming Trump visit. But what I just feel is, how could he do it? How could Peter Mandelson do it? That he actually wrote an email of support to somebody who was in prison facing federal charges, having been convicted in the state of Florida of the most horrific sexual offences against young girls. How could he write giving him an encouragement and support? And I don't know whether you guys watched the documentary about Epstein, where these young women talked about the ruination of their lives by this man abusing his wealth and his power. And the idea that Peter Mandelson sided with Epstein in that situation. And this is always the question, whose side are you on? You've got to be on the side of the vulnerable and not against the person who commits criminal offences abusing their power. So my first thought is, how could he do it? What was he thinking? And that email where he says, your friends love you and will support you, and every problem is an opportunity. How could he think the problem of being on remand in custody was somehow an opportunity for Epstein? So I think it's absolutely terrible. And I think that my second how could he is how could he do it to the government? How could he do it to Keir Starmer? How could he do it to Labour? How could he put himself forward when he, by his own admission, he knew all these emails were there and he also knew they were going to come out? So how could he have put himself into the public spotlight? How could he have put himself in a pivotal position when he knew there was a ticking time bomb, which I'm afraid is now exploding? And I know the state visit from Trump is important, and Trump puts a great deal of store on it. And our relationship with America is important in terms of actual jobs and prosperity and growth in this country. But I think that the situation is just not sustainable. But I think he should resign. But I think we know from Peter Mandelson's past history that he doesn't resign by his own characterisation of himself. He says, I'm a fighter, not a quitter. And both times before, when he got involved in scandals, he refused to resign. He fought for his position and ultimately had to be sacked. So I think we can safely rule out the idea that he's going to say to himself, look, what I did was not only wrong, but it was so wrong that it's casting a stain on this government and on our country, and therefore there's no way forward for me. I should resign. I mean, that's what I think he should do, but I don't think he will do that. And therefore it comes to Keir Starmer in the face of what we now know and is in the public domain about what Peter Mandelson has done. Does he think it's right to carry on having him as our representative in the United States? Or is it best to fire him now and get on with really making the Trump visit a good success, and also thereby building the confidence of people who are looking to this government to make tackling sex abuse of women and girls a real priority for this government? And I think that's what he's got to do.
So you think that if you don't think Mandelson's going to resign, you do think Keir Starmer needs to sack him?
I think he should resign, because that would be the decent and honourable thing. But it looks clear he's not going to do that. And therefore it lands on to Keir Starmer. Is he going to keep him on, even in the face of what we all now know? Or is he going to say, you can't represent Britain and therefore you're going to have to be fired? And I think that's what Keir Starmer should do.
Ruth, just in the PMQs, Kemi Badenoch actually pinned Starmer. I mean, he was squirming around on the hook, wasn't he?
She did. This is by far and away her best PMQs. And because she kept on it, because she kept the initial sort of 5 questions very short, gave him no room for manoeuvre, made sure that, you know, it was obvious to everybody when she was asking very short, very direct questions that he wasn't answering them. All he was saying was due process was followed, due process was followed. I mean, he sounded like the very worst days of Theresa May when she was being called a Maybot. Like that was what he was forced into because of the way she was pinning him down. Mm-hmm. But the thing that struck me was the silence from the Labour benches. There was nobody that was defending this guy. I mean, I think they were probably like me, looking at this car crash unfolding in front of them, going, what is he doing? Why is he defending this guy? Why is he tying his own prospects to somebody who is, you know, a serial sort of failure in terms of having to resign because he sucked up to rich men and they've got him into trouble. He did it with Jeffrey Robinson in the 90s. He had to do it, resign after the Hinduja brothers affair when he was, you know, a rich donor who was trying to lobby for his passport. You know, we've seen this before from Peter Mandelson. He is absolutely in thrall to rich businessmen that try and exert power, and he sucks up to them, and he tries to do things for them that get him into trouble. I mean, the other thing that caught me as well was, you know, when Keir Starmer last week went into bat for Angela Rayner, you could kind of tell why he was doing it. And her defence was that, look, I've got a really complicated situation. I took advice. I thought I was doing the right thing. It turns out I didn't do the right thing, but it was an honest mistake. And he went into bat for her for that. What I got about this is that this is a ludicrous defence, absolutely ludicrous defence that is being mounted by Peter Mandelson. His defence, that when he went and he tried to spike the story that he knew was coming, and he went on the Harry Cole podcast and he gave the interview, his defence was, oh, I was taken in by this guy. Look at me, gee shucks. I'm so innocent. I'm so naive. I'm so gauche that this, you know, this sparkling, dazzling personality, he just took me in. He took me in for several years. And even though, and this was the bit that disgusted me, like absolutely disgusted me, is like, yeah, no, I never saw anything of that whole, paedophilia. I might have ridden the Lolita Express and gone to Pedo Island, as everybody called it back then, but I didn't see any girls being abused, didn't see anything at all, because I'm a gay man. So, because I'm a gay man, didn't see a thing. I was just like, don't use that as a shield. Don't you dare use that as a shield, Peter. And also, nobody believes that you are some sort of innocent that doesn't know how the world works or how powerful men work, because you have spent a lot of your adult years trying to get as close to them as possible. Whether that's on Oleg Deripaska's boat, whether that's, borrowing money for a brand new house from Jeffrey Robinson, like I say, whether that's the Nduja brothers, don't you dare suggest that, this is all foreign to you. And the toe-curling nature of some of the emails that are coming out now, of how needy he is, not just saying, oh, we love you, you're my best pal, but also, oh, I'm hoping to come to your island at Christmas. Do you, will you be there? Will you have space for me? Will you have time for me? I mean, it is horrendous.
Ruth, I've podded with you for a long time. You're absolutely furious. I don't know if I've seen you this angry. You're absolutely furious.
Do you know why I'm furious? I'll tell you why I'm furious, because there is one line that keeps sticking in my head, and it's from one of the victims that tried to get justice from Jeffrey Epstein. And her line was, we were passed around his friends like platters of fruit, like fruit platters. It's horrendous what happened to these women. Horrendous. And I don't believe that just because you happen to know somebody that goes and does a bad thing, that automatically makes you a bad person. But Peter Mandelson didn't just know somebody that did a bad thing. He tried to help him out. He tried to console him and say, oh, it's terrible what's happened to you getting convicted for child sex offences. Absolutely terrible that this happened to you. You should fight it. You need to try and get early release from your conviction. And he continued being... He went and stayed with him at his house after this, saying, oh, this could never have happened to you in Britain. This is an outrage that you've been convicted. There's not a shred of thought for these victims at all in anything we've seen so far. Now, it might come later, it might come out, I'll try and give them the benefit of the doubt here, but so far we've seen nothing either than, oh, you poor man getting done by a court for committing a heinous crime.
I think we should I should just put in what Mandelson has said in these interviews. This is his account of it. He has said he's expressed deep regret. He said, I wish I'd never met Epstein. He said he feels a profound sense of sympathy for those people. I regret very, very deeply carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done. He said, I fell for and accepted assurances that he had given me about his indictment, his original criminal case in Florida. Like very many people, I took at face value what he said. With hindsight, with fresh information many years later, we realised that we had been wrong to believe in this charismatic criminal liar. So look, that's where Mandelson is. I want to bring it back to Starmer, because I felt watching PMQs yesterday, I think Starmer hates it. I think he hated it. I think he was in the chamber. He has made a big play about halving sexual violence against women and girls as part of his government. I believe genuinely he cares about that. And he clearly hated what he had to do. And he actually made a mistake in Prime Minister's questions as well. Like, Kemi absolutely wiped the floor with him and then, left him, it was like a knockout for her. Partly, I think, because he was just really struggling with his, if you like, lines to take. What on earth is Starmer doing? Harriet, do you feel any sympathy for Starmer, or do you actually feel like many of his MPs feel a bit of sympathy, but also like, why the hell did you appoint this guy in the first place, given the backstory and also the past behaviours, as Ruth has pointed out to? I mean, is your view like Keir Starmer should never have appointed him and you kind of reap what you sow?
I think Keir Starmer will be anguished about this. I mean, he's been Director of Public Prosecutions. He's been involved in cases of people who've sex trafficked young girls. So the side he's been on is justice for women and girls against predatory sex offenders and trying to bring them to justice. That's where he's stood. That's what he is. So he will be anguished about this. And I think his good intention was to appoint somebody who is incredibly talented, who could really build the relationship between the UK and the US at a time when Trump was already threatening tariffs against us. And he was wanting to protect the UK from tariffs and have a really strong relationship with the US. And that's what motivated the appointment. And I don't want ever anything I say ever to be used against the government. But, you know, I'm on the side of those women and young girls. And the trouble is that men do have impunity when people in powerful positions rally round them and support them. That's not action without consequences. That helps their impunity. It helps them survive and carry on to commit further offences. So those people who rally round powerful sex abusers, you know, are doing a very bad thing. If his judgment is really that bad, then how on earth can he represent Britain on the world stage and with our most powerful ally? I can imagine if I could have said in the past to Peter Mandelson, I'm a foolish person who makes terrible misjudgments. Please, can you support me in my future work? He'd have said no. I mean, he's famously very much better at advising other people about what they should do in their own interest, in the interest of the government and the interest of the party. But he's obviously not able to have that sense of what he should do. And the idea of a UK ambassador giving an exclusive interview to The Sun to Harry Cole in his own defence, I mean, this has just gone out of the realms of where it should be at all. We're getting nearer and nearer to the Trump visit. And I think we can make a big success of this state visit for Trump. And it is important because Trump thinks the UK is important and his state visit is really important to him. So we have to make a success of this. And we have to not have this running hour by hour throughout the state visit, which if Peter Mandelson is not fired, that's what's going to happen, because the questions will keep coming. Was there a vetting process? Did Keir Starmer know about these emails? If not, why did he not know about the emails? What were the disclosure obligations put on Peter Mandelson? Because usually when you're appointed, you are given a general disclosure obligation which says, have you got any skeletons in your cupboard? If so, tell us. And failure to disclose can then render you subsequently not able to carry on with the job.
I actually kind of think that Keir Starmer's doubly screwed on this one. One, because he backed him in the Commons, backed him 3 times actually in the Commons, and his whole shtick at the moment is, you know, I'm a decent man that's followed process, that's done everything right, I've done it in the right way, and if people around me have feet of clay, then I'll get rid of them because, you know, we have to be shining and white and all the rest of it. And I think where this one comes undone is that you know, this was known. It also comes undone because this isn't the normal process for appointing a UK ambassador to the US. It hasn't been a political appointment for more than 50 years. Keir Starmer chose to make this a political appointment. He chose then to make it Peter Mandelson, who was the political appointment. It is usually a career diplomat that comes up through the FCO that's been tested in a junior embassy somewhere else. That goes kind of up the chain that way. So this was a direct judgment that he chose to break the natural order of things. He chose to leave process. And his defence is also that, we did all the vetting and it was transparent and all the rest of it. But as soon as he's asked, well, show us it then, show us the receipts, he refuses to do so. And I think the problem that we also have is, and again, this comes back to Ghislaine Maxwell, is because she's a British citizen, because she's already stood trial, this is the person that was a kind of almost co-defendant in the case about this, you can't tell me that the security services of our country haven't looked at other British citizens that were involved in Jeffrey Epstein, because it became an interest, because it became a matter, and a huge international trial, which was a matter of interest for the government. So I think he is in a very difficult position that way. And the other point is the timing of this. I mean, I don't want to be crude, ladies, but Peter Mandelson could not have done a bigger shit on the bed at a worse time than this because of the state visit next week. And I feel for King Charles. I genuinely do. I mean, I'm not entirely sure he was delighted about the idea that he was going to have another state visit from Trump, but he happily went along with the government. It was in the national interest that Keir Starmer was able to sit in the Oval Office and wave the bit of paper in this unprecedented second state visit. But it's happening in 5 days. Yeah. And even if Mandelson now goes, the questions are still going to be about Epstein. That brings in Prince Andrew, which is very uncomfortable for the king. We know that Trump hates talking about Epstein. He was his friend too. He says that the stuff that's signed from him in the book isn't his, it's fake news. He says he quit his friendship with him when the conviction came down, and that was a lot earlier than Mandelson. But he hates having to answer on it. This is so deeply uncomfortable for Keir Starmer. There is no good way out of this. He can sack Mandelson, he cannot sack Mandelson, and he's in trouble either way. And I honestly think he's shaved years off his prime ministership unless he can recover from this.
Every option is horrible.
But the thing is this could have been presented.
Yes.
Have a diplomat do the job. Even if you make it a political appointment, don't make it Peter Mandelson.
Yes,
we already knew he knew this guy. Like it was so, and that's what's going to be bugging. That's what's going to be keeping Keir Starmer up at night, because there will have been something in his gut when he made this appointment that he would have had a reservation, but he chose to do it anyway, or he was advised to do it anyway, or Peter Mandelson was lobbying saying, I'm the sort of man that Trump understands and I can be good for Britain. And he'll be kicking himself, because you never kick yourself when you do things with the best information for the best of intentions, and for whatever reason it doesn't work out, because you can defend it.
There's a few things going on here about the decision to appoint him. I mean, there's lots of reporting that his chief of staff, Starmer's chief of staff, was pro Mandelson, and also Jonathan Powell, who's his chief foreign affairs advisor, had worked with Mandelson in the Blair years. Harriet, you will know all of them. Tim Allen, who is now the new executive director of communications, just has come in, is very close to Peter Mandelson. They're very good friends. So there's a whole Blairite operation in Number 10 that has links with Mandelson. And you can imagine that the Prime Minister might have been in two minds a bit, or might have had some misgivings back in a couple of years back. When did they appoint Mandelson? Last year? When he was appointed. There's a story out today by Jason Groves in the Mail saying Lord Glassman wrote a memo saying do not appoint Peter Mandelson, saying he's the wrong man in the wrong time in the wrong place. So there are warnings, and I think more of that will come out just in terms of what they knew, what are Number 10 doing now. There's a few things going on. But what I want to just update you all on is, and this is from my colleague Sam Coates, that the Foreign Office lead civil servant, Ollie Robbins, has now written to Peter Mandelson to ask a series of questions about his dealings with Epstein, such as, when did you last meet him before Epstein took his life?
And they don't know that because they didn't ask him before.
But
like,
just,
what?
And Harriet can explain a bit to us, because this is kind of the difference between a political appointment and a civil servant appointment. But I don't think Ollie Robbins writes that memo without Number 10's permission,
rubber
if you
stamp,
like, right? But Harriet, just explain to us, because the PM was asked loads in the comments about what was the process, and he kind of looked a bit uncomfortable, and he said due process was followed, and then Badenoch asked him if he would publish the advice. But you were explaining to me that there's a difference between a political appointment and a government civil service appointment. Can you unpack that for me? Because it actually really does matter in this case, doesn't it?
It does. I think people sometimes are quite snooty about the civil service processes and think they're bureaucratic, but actually they're processes with a purpose. So, for example, if there's going to be a civil service appointment like an ambassador, there is something called developed vetting, which has the two elements. One, that actually they investigate and look to see what they can find from all sources about this person. So they do investigation of their own initiative. But the other is that there's a very big obligation on disclosure, that you have to disclose, if you're putting yourself forward, everything that can possibly cause embarrassment to the government by you being in this post. So the obligation is on you to make full disclosure. And that is the two parts of the process of developed vetting when there's a civil service appointment. But Peter Mandelson was not a civil service appointment because he wasn't a civil servant. He was a political appointment by Number 10. So the questions that are being pursued now are, what was the process of vetting him? Was there an investigation? Did they ask for the civil service, even though he was a political appointment, not a civil service appointment? Did they ask the civil service to do developed vetting? And if so, what did they find out? And did Peter Mandelson follow the disclosure obligations? So I think that those are difficult questions to answer. But I think the questions about the process, I think Keir Starmer said in Prime Minister's questions, due process was followed. But that begs the question, what were those processes in what was ultimately a political appointment?
Can we also just touch on just about the fury in the Parliamentary Labour Party? Because I have been picking up that apparently, and this is to quote a minister, the Parliamentary Party were apoplectic when details of post-arrest contact between Epstein and Mandelson were revealed. And they're furious because they now feel that Number 10 knew about this and didn't care. Is this a real moment for jeopardy for Starmer if he doesn't bite the bullet on this?
They're thinking, what are our constituents going to make of this? What are they going to think about the Labour government? You know, we were so much coming into government to be not sleazy like the characterisation of the Conservative Party, to be, you know, to have a higher ethical standards. And this just looks as though it plays into the argument, oh, you're all the same. So I think the reason why Labour MPs are concerned is twofold. One, they're concerned because we've got a really strong concern about the victims of male sexual violence. But secondly, they know what their voters will be thinking about it, and they want voters to understand that we are a different sort of government. We do have ethical standards, and that this cuts right across that.
Now, you might be thinking, having us run through all of this and explain the situation and put it in the context of violence against women and girls and male perpetrators and female victims, and how Starmer feels about it, but also how the Labour Party feel about it, and some of the red flags around Mandelson, that this is an open and crucially the new evidence about having contact and trying to defend a convicted sex offender. You might think that this is an open and shut case. So why on earth is Peter Mandelson still here at the moment? And I am saying this with massive trepidation because I think no sooner has this podcast come out, things might move very quickly. No, I've got no sense, but actually the more I think about it, the more we talk about it, the less sustainable this situation seems. But the problem Starmer has, and this is what the context you have to understand this in, is Trump is coming in a few days. And as Ruth was saying, there's a whole royal family element. Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein, want to avoid all of that. But this is a US president coming to the UK who absolutely hates being asked anything about the Epstein files or how it relates to him. Yeah. In the US, although this is a massive story about our ambassador, this will not be a massive story there, I wouldn't imagine. But should Lord Mandelson have to resign ahead of this Trump state visit over Epstein, well, you can imagine the questions that follow and the spotlight around Epstein and then Donald Trump. So this is really, really politically difficult for the government. The other thing about the ambassador, I should say, is that typically an ambassador is pitch rolling the whole event. So they'll be doing the logistics, they'll be doing the briefings, they'll be doing the organisational work. So the ambassador's actually playing a critical role in getting ready for the state event at this particular moment in time. But look, this is a massive headache for Starmer because he has put so much effort into the relationship with Donald Trump.
I think that if he is fired, which I expect he will be, the questions about process to Keir Starmer and what due diligence was undertaken on Keir Starmer's behalf before the appointment was made, will still come, but they will be immeasurably less than if Peter Mandelson is still in post. And also, I've got full confidence in the professionalism and expertise in the Foreign Office. They will be able to run an excellent state visit without Peter Mandelson, but it'd be so much worse if he's actually right there. And that even with those emails now in everybody's minds about how he sided with this man who'd been a terrible sex abuser at a time after he'd been convicted and when he was awaiting further charges, that somebody with that sort of moral judgment can be representing this country on the world stage, that is a far bigger problem.